Welcome to today's webinar. My name's Amy and I'm here today with Becky Hutchins, who's been with Marketing Sciences since 2012 and completed the MRS Advanced Certificate in 2013, and she's going to share with you today 10 tips for successfully completing the MRS Advanced Certificate. So over to you, Becky.
Great, thank you very much, Amy. Yes, so as Amy mentioned, so I completed the Advanced Certificate a couple of years ago now, back in, I think it's 2013. And so we've got another group of kind of researchers who are just coming into Marketing Sciences who are about to, or currently completing the MRS Advanced Certificate. So a few of us got together and we thought, what kind of tips and tricks can we share with them and pass on for them doing it? And then we also wanted to share that perhaps wider, just for anyone else who is also taking part. So some of the tips I'm going to share are quite sort of general exam preparation kind of tips that you may have already come across in previous sort of qualifications, so doing your degree and things like that. So hopefully they will act as a useful reminder. But a few of them are also quite specific to the integrated assignment and to the Advanced Certificate exam. Also, sorry, just before we go on, I wanted to mention if you have any questions at all, just post them in the question box and we can answer those at the end for you. Okay, so the first tip really is keep it relevant and play to your strengths. So in terms of particularly thinking about the assessment, try and pick an idea that is relevant to the work that you're doing and to the area of business that you're working in, as this will really help you kind of in using the knowledge that you already have in terms of answering or writing the brief and also coming up with a suitable research proposal. Rather than sort of going crazy and picking something that is completely irrelevant. This will just help to confirm that knowledge and also help in terms of the qualification being relevant to what you're going to go on to use it for. The second one, so learning from people around you. So I know the MRS mentioned about making sure you're kind of doing the work on your own and the assignment is your own, and so obviously that is really important, but it's also worth kind of making the most of the expertise that's around you, so speaking with colleagues or perhaps other people who have taken the Advanced Certificate in the past, and just in terms of sort of sounding out ideas with them and in terms of your approach and things like that can be really useful, but as long as they're not writing it for you, then there's no harm in making the most of that resource. So the third tip for you is reading the set textbook. So fairly obvious one, but the Advanced Certificate is based on the Practice of Market Research textbook by Yvonne McGivern. So if you can get hold of it, or perhaps you can split the cost with a group of you doing it, this is quite useful because that's what they're basing the assessment on. The fourth one really is kind of just a reminder not to get too caught up in the kind of thinking about what method you should be talking about and using in the assignment. What's really key, because there's no right or wrong answer in terms of the exact method you use unless it's all explicitly stated in the brief you've written. But what's more important is actually just being able to show that you can justify why you've chosen a particular method. And how that will help to answer the research questions posed in the brief. But the method itself is perhaps less important. But you do still need to remember to explain it and give all your reasons behind it. Okay, so fifth tip for you is not to forget the code. As with kind of a real research proposal, you need to make sure that it's ethically sound and that it adheres to the MRS Code of Conduct. So it's essential that within market research we follow these rules that are set out, and also rules more broadly if the research was to take place in another country. It could be good to sort of refer to any sort of explicitly to any particular guidelines if they're of importance to the proposal that you're suggesting. So particularly if you're thinking about the sample you're using, so for example if you're looking at researching with children or young people, or if you're using client samples, it might involve kind of large data sets of personal data for customers, then it's worth kind of checking what the code says about those, and you can find the MRS Code of Conduct on their website. So go and have a look on there, and it's quite useful to reference that and to show that you've taken that into consideration. Number 6, the word count. This is, I think, one of the questions we've come across most often when we're doing the advanced certificate here is what about the word count? So for the integrated assignment, you need to make sure your word count is between 3,500 and 4,000 words. If you go over, say, 4,001, it will be deemed as non-compliant, so your integrated assignment won't get marked, which would be awful for that one word. So make sure when you're reading it that you're kind of trying to keep quite concise and focused, because it's not a huge amount of words for this assignment. And try to have a plan for how long you want each section to be. I know there are some guidelines, again, on the MRS website, which give a bit more specific details. So, for example, they suggest that the brief itself should be around kind of 750 words. So don't use up too many of your valuable words on that part. You want to save most of them for the proposal itself. Having a proofread, so I think the deadline, so try and give yourself enough time to have a read through of your assessment, and also it can be really useful to ask a peer to read it through too. So again, sort of using those people around you that perhaps have experience of doing it in the past. This is useful just for kind of really helping to pick up on small errors, so if you've kind of misspelt words or sort of typos and minor things like that. And also just to make sure it all reads clearly and makes sense. And also kind of on that note as well, it's also really useful having that proofread. Just make sure you don't forget those little details which can cost you marks or could cause them to not mark your assignment. So things like forgetting to include your word count at the end of the integrated assignment, and also make sure you have your cover sheet, which again you can get from the MRS website, and also one really minor thing, but actually it has a big implications, is making sure that you have anonymised anything in your assignment if you are basing it on a real client brief, for example, or a real product and things like that. So making sure that you've substituted all of those. All right, tip number 8, sorry, using practice papers. This is probably sort of like the most useful part, particularly for preparing for the exam, is to have a go at the practice papers, which are on the MRS website. This is really useful because it gives you an idea of kind of what the questions they're going to answer are, as well as kind of the time that's available. You've only got sort of 2.5 hours for the exam, so it's really useful to give you that practice of writing to time, and making sure you're kind of spending enough, spreading that out effectively across the different sections. Also on the MRS website as well is the answer guides to go with the past papers, which again are just really, really useful for kind of using them to look at how they are expecting you to answer them, and the types of terminology and wording that they're looking for. So I would definitely recommend going and having a look at those. Number 9, so talking to others to complete the certificate who are also completing the certificate. So this depends a little bit probably on your learning style, but it can prove very useful, particularly if there's a group of you who are all taking the certificate at the same time. It just helps to kind of talk through the different topics together, as it's likely that you might have picked up on different information, so it's quite useful in terms of the revising. But I know certainly sometimes myself, I quite like to lock myself away, so if you want to, then that can be a good thing to do. And then the 10th tip, so the final one, is just really so kind of, as with all exams, make sure you leave yourself plenty of time to get there, so that you're not rushing in and the last minute having to sit down once it's already started, and also making sure that you do things like planning your route to make sure you know where you're headed, so you don't avoid getting lost or anything like that. Okay. Well, thank you so much for listening. So it was quite a quick one, but there are just some simple tips there that we hope that you can all use going forward in doing the assignment and the exam. Thank you very much for listening. I think we're just going to check now if for any questions that you might have sent through.
Yep, thanks Becky. So I'm just going to have a quick look. Okay, I can see we've got one question from Mark. Good question. He's sitting the exam in January. Do we know when the results will be out?
Okay, yes, yeah, good question. Once you've done all the hard work, you want to know when you'll be getting the results in. If you're sitting the exam in January, then the results will come out around, I think it's the week commencing the 18th of April. You'll have those through. And then for anyone who's doing it later than that, if you're doing it for the June cohort, then the results for that will come through in September, around mid-September time.
Great, thank you. And I'll just check for another question. Okay. So we've got one question from, bear with us while we just see who that one's from. We'll come back to that, but we've got another question from Sarah, which asks, do you have any broad examples of the kinds of questions? Can you give us a typical example of a question from the exam?
Okay. So I think how the exam's set out. There's two parts of it if you don't know already. So the first part's compulsory. So you have to answer that. So that will be given as like a case study for a business, and then there'll be a series of questions after it which you need to answer. And the second section, you have to choose 2 questions out of 6 to answer. So the type of example you get, there's always a bit of kind of detail up front about kind of perhaps what the business is and what they're looking to achieve, and that kind of information. So definitely make sure you read that before you go through to the questions. An example of types of questions they might ask are things like, can you outline the benefits and limitations of using a particular approach for a retailer that's considering doing some kind of self-completion research, say, and then what they're looking for you to offer is a kind of a balanced view of both the benefits of using a certain approach that they've described and then also the limitations.
Great, thank you. And then we have another question from, apologies if I don't pronounce this name correctly, from Sayavash. What sections and headings should I use in the proposal in the integrated assignment?
Okay, that's a great question. If you have a look on the, again on the MRS website, they have got some guidelines in terms of how you lay it out, and they definitely do recommend using sections and headings. So things like you could use, how to start it? So things, like your method, sample, expected results, and an analysis, data analysis, and those types of things. So just these clear sections that kind of split out like each phase of the research and how you're addressing it and what it's going to give you.
And one final question, I think, unless there are any last-minute questions come in. One final question from Jenny is, how did you prepare for your exam? What did you do?
Okay, well, what I did for mine, so in terms of the exam, I think I definitely used the past papers that were on the MRS website, and particularly the answer guides, because I think I found this really useful in terms of, I think quite often I knew the answer, but how I might describe it wasn't quite the way that the wording that they were looking for. So I think I definitely used the answer guides in terms of thinking about what are they mentioning in there in terms of to get the marks, and so how that would help, and how that would help me in terms of how I would approach the answers.
Okay, and we've got another question from Sayavash. How much time per week, as an estimate, did you spend on studying for the advanced certificate? You've got to be truthful.
Ooh, yeah. I think it's fair to say I do tend to leave things to the last minute personally, but probably I would recommend, I mean, everyone's different, so it depends on how you like to prepare for things like the exams. The integrated assignment, it probably spent a bit of maybe a week or so, kind of in terms of thinking that through and writing it all up. So that probably ends up being about 2 weeks actually once you've done the proofread and checking. In terms of preparing for the exam, I think that was, I expect, a weekend and a couple of evenings revising, having been through all the material over the course of around 6 weeks, and then but the actual revising probably was a few evenings.
Okay, and we've got one more question from another one from Saivash. Sorry for all the questions. No, that's quite all right. This is the last one. Did you read anything else than the McGivern textbook?
Okay. No, yeah, absolutely. As Amy says, thank you for all the questions. That's great. I read, so probably didn't read any other specific textbooks. The McGivern one was the main one I use in terms of understanding the material, but also using kind of knowledge already had from work I've done previously. And also, I was on the MRS website, and so I read the sort of code of conduct to check for kind of areas that were relevant to the research proposal I was writing. And yeah, so that's kind of it. So it depends on where exactly your kind of level of understanding of kind of market research is coming from. But it can help certainly to read around the topic a bit. Great.
Thank you. It looks like we haven't got any other questions, so we'll call it a day there. Thank you so much to everybody who was listening, particularly those who were listening live. And if you're listening in the recorded version as well, we wish you all the best of luck for anybody sitting the exam in the near future. We have, at Marketing Sciences Unlimited, we do have a programme of webinars. We're currently planning our programme for 2016. So if you would like to be notified for any future webinars, please contact Becky. Her email address is on the screen, and we'll add you to our distribution list. Thanks everyone. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much. Bye.